Hello guys, now we are on the third game in the Sicilian Scheveningen variation, and this is the F4 Tal variation, and this game is a model game for black side. So the game is played between Zoltan and Gary Kasparov as black in 1994. So the game goes E4, C5, knight F3, D6, D4, CD4, knight takes D4 and knight F6, knight C3, A6, F4, E6, and now queen to F3. A note on the move order is perhaps called for. White plays his queen to F3 before developing either bishops. The most important idea behind doing so is the prevention of B5. If white wants to include both bishop e3 and queen f3 in his plan, then beginning with bishop e3 is somewhat inaccurate. Black can immediately station his queen's bishop on b7, opposing the white queen on the long diagonal. Here, if at all bishop to e3 and then b5, queen f3, bishop b7, black immediately threatens b4 here, and now a3 is unappealing because black would gain an important hook to latch onto, making a pawn storm that bit stronger in case white were to castle long. In what follows, this will be an important theme. And now bishop to d3, knight bd7, and then g4. White has decided not to play a3, and therefore it is likely a matter of time before black chases the c3 knight. Ultimately, it will want to perch on g3 so as to defend the e4 pawn. Therefore, white uses the time he has now to play g4, preventing that pawn from being blocked by the intended knight rerouting. Now on knight bd7 and then g4. It is also interesting to strengthen the threat of b4 thrust rather than playing it immediately. Now knight to c5, g5, knight fd7. Here white has an interesting option, b4, b4 and knight. Now knight takes d3, cd3. The game doesn't seem to have made databases, but here white won. In this in this variation a game was played between Timman and Hodgson. Here instead of now if knight to c5, if b4 is played, black's best idea now is to drive the knight away. Now knight ce2 and knight to c5, and now knight to g3. White has managed to get his knight behind the g pawn and has a considerable space advantage on the king side. However, of course, black's position is more resilient than it might appear at first glance. Rook c8, g5, knight fd7, h4. Here the black player in the game, Chandler Timan, found a very deep strategic plan. So let's get back to the game. So here in the original game, queen f3 was played first, and then now black put queen b6. This is one of the major improvements that made black's position a lot easier to handle in recent times. This improvement was made by Kasparov. Previously, queen c7 was played with the idea to proceed regardless with b5. Black sets up protection of the b7 square so that he can meet white's tactical idea of e5 with counter strike of bishop b7. Now a3, an interesting find which has become associated with British Grandmaster Michael Adams. Black's idea is that if white knight leaves the center, almost by definition it will occupy a less strong post. Furthermore, after knight b3, queen c7, black obtains a better version of the position type. And here if bishop e3 is played, then queen takes b2, king to d2, and d5 leads to deep trouble for white. The threat is bishop b4, and there are additional tactical possibilities associated with knight takes e4 check. So after queen b6, white played a3, and now knight c6. The most basic point of white's eighth move is that after queen takes d4, bishop e3, the queen will be trapped. So now knight takes c6, b takes c6. Queen takes c6 here doesn't really fit. Now b3. This is an interesting way of playing. Now that the c line for black is closed, white doesn't so much mind the creation of weaknesses along the c file. White also shields the b2 square and prepares to develop his queen's bishop there. Now bishop b7, bishop b2, and d5. Kasparov clarifies his intentions. He is occupying the center immediately and strongly, considering a march of the c pawn. Now long castles. And this move was criticized. It was too dangerous for white. Here e5, knight to d7, and knight to a4, queen to c7, and bishop to d3, and now c5 is equal. Black would also have had nothing to complain about. Now long castles, and now queen a5, e5, knight to d7, knight to a4, and queen to c7. And this move is played to stop f5. Now rook e1. This is a very unnatural move. Here white could have continued with bishop d3, but he rejected because of c5 by black. Now g6, g4. Consistent, but still this makes the queen side situation worse for white. Now c5, threatening to play d4. Now bishop to g2, rook to b8. An annoying little move. Black protects the b7 bishop and sets up some ideas along the b file. Now queen d1. The attempt to break through with here f5 succeeds in its immediate objective, but after c4, now fe6, fe6, and rook h f1, and the cold-blooded c takes b3, queen f7 check, king d8. It is the white king which faces the more immediate issues. So in the game, queen d1 was played and c4 now. Kasparov proceeds in rather thematic fashion, and now king b1, queen a5. This is a sensible attacking move, but there was another move which was stronger. It was bishop to c6. So then if there are two threats now, bishop takes a4 and c3, and now after knight c3, knight to c5 and b4 and queen b7 and king a1, and now a5 will provide the jolt needed to break white's sense of security. So but in the game, Kasparov played queen a5 and bishop c3, and now queen b5. Here actually Kasparov's ideas was after king a2, bishop c6, knight to c3, and bishop takes a3. He is breaking through here. After this, now this is coming. So but white played bishop to c3. Now queen b5, king a2, bishop to c6. Here possibly more to the point was knight c5, and after knight takes c5, bishop takes c5. But Kasparov played bishop c6. Now f5. This was what white had been playing for, but due to the lack of piece support, the thrust achieves nothing. Now queen b7, fe6, fe6, knight b2, cb3 check, cb3, and now knight c5. A new piece arrives on the battle. There isn't any meaningful defense any longer, and now bishop b4. And here the white's king fortress would also be breached if in case of b4, then knight to e4, and after bishop e4, bishop takes e4, d takes e4. Now rook hf1. In this case, by the humble a pawn, a5 breaks through, and instead of b4, if rook hf1 is played, then knight takes b3, and rook to f6, and then bishop to d7. So after bishop to b4, knight takes b3. This is a useful sacrifice. Now after queen takes b3, now a5. Rook hf1 and a takes b4, a4. Now bishop e7, rook c1, rook f8, g5. Now bishop takes g5. Kasparov gladly accepts the sacrifice, and now after queen h3, rook f5, rook takes f5, e takes f5. Now rook d1, b3 check, king b1, rook c8. Here queen e7 was the quickest way to get the job done. Now after rook d3, now bishop takes a4, and now after knight takes a4, rook c1 check, and then now king b2, rook c2 check, king b1. Now queen b4, rook takes b3, queen e1 check, king takes c2, queen c1 check, king d3, queen c4 mate. So guys, I hope you enjoyed the game. This was an illustrative game for the black side in the Scheveningen variation for the f4 system. So we'll be looking upon another game for black. So I'll be meeting you in the next game. Thank you all.